Good evening, everyone. Of course, Victoria is the capital of British Columbia. I'm sorry. It is not Vancouver. It is Victoria. Yes. Vancouver is the one that has the money laundering scheme named after it. And it's a very expensive city to live, but it is certainly not the capital of British Columbia. So I apologize for misreporting that. Correction noted. Okay, CTV News Montreal is reporting Legault admits to meeting with SNC Lavalin's CEO to discuss criminal charges. Francois Legault, who's the Premier of Quebec, is admitting he met with the head of SNC Lavalin late last year to discuss an agreement with Ottawa that would allow the engineering company to avoid prosecution on bribery and fraud charges. Last fall, the company approached Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Lebel to seek her support for a deferred prosecution agreement so SNC Lavalin could pay a fine as opposed to being prosecuted. Lebel refused at the meeting. In October, however, Legault met with SNC Lavalin CEO Neil Bruce. The Premier has so far been reluctant to discuss what transpired at the meeting, but he spoke about it Friday. Quote, "We discussed how we can keep those jobs during the interim period where we have very important accusations, criminal accusations," he said. A guilty verdict would see SNC Lavalin barred from bidding on federal contracts for 10 years, and Legault said that he would punish thousands of Quebec employees who did nothing wrong. Quote, "The company has to pay a large amount of penalties. They are ready to do so. People who were involved in these matters, they need to be punished. But how do we protect the jobs?" says Legault. The Premier said he's worried that as SNC Lavalin's share price continues to fall, the company could become the target of a foreign takeover, resulting in the company's head office moving. Quote, "I told the Prime Minister, people should be punished, but we need to protect Quebec jobs and protect the future of SNC Lavalin," said Legault. Okay, I want to point out here, just before we get to the next piece, which is the companion piece to this by Mr. Rex Murphy, I want to point out these are government contracts we're talking about. If SNC Lavalin doesn't get them, another engineering firm would. And you can incentivize even. You can say, we'll prioritize firms who hire SNC Lavalin engineers who've been put out of a job because of SNC Lavalin legal action. You can incentivize this. It's not hard. So the fiction that they're spinning is, even if you think about it for 10 seconds, fantasy. Number one, this is 9,000 jobs at most across Canada. And number two, they've allowed Alberta to flounder. And Mr. Murphy makes a lot of these points too, so we'll talk about, or I'll read his piece now. But it is incredible that this is the line they're going to take, despite all of the legal stuff aside, the fact that that is legally exempt from being allowed to be considered in the law aside. It's still a terrible, stupid way to say, we're trying to protect you by allowing this company to break the law. It's you, dear citizen, who will suffer if SNC Lavalin is not allowed to break the law. Right? Like, just how crazy and how stupid do they think Canadians are? Apparently very stupid. I think they think Canadians are very stupid or not paying attention. Okay, this is the National Post. And Rex Murphy saying, quote, "Sorry, liberals, the jobs excuse for SNC Lavalin debacle won't fly. Whoever is masterminding the Liberal response to the SNC Lavalin scandal is confusing the anchor and the life jacket. To be clear, the life jacket is the one that keeps you afloat. The anchor is the heavy thing." The Justice Committee Liberals, who are obviously not mariners, met Wednesday only to shut the committee down for a week to stall on allowing Jody Wilson-Raybould back to complete her testimony, giving every indication possible that they weren't really interested in hearing from her at all anymore. There's nothing opposition MPs could have done more effectively to juice up a highly charged saga than the five Liberals' blatant and televised amputation of what a committee named Justice ought to be doing, which is to hear from the central character in this story, free to speak fully and without the restraint of various privileges, the full account of why she left cabinet and why another senior minister, Jane Philpott, felt conscience bound to leave in solidarity with her. The same committee has also killed opposition efforts to call Justin Trudeau's chief of staff, Katie Telford, PMO advisor Elder Marquess, and Matthew Bouchard, the former chief of staff to Ms. Wilson-Raybould, Jessica Prince, and notably the only figure who really has the whole story, the Prime Minister himself. There is something in the Liberals' behavior touchingly reminiscent of the classic line from Dr. Strangelove's, quote, "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room." Committee Chairman Anthony Housefather, quote, "Witnesses? You can't call for witnesses here. This is the Justice Committee." Good one, Mr. Murphy. Back to the article. That's the tactic they've decided on. Close it down. Leave the full story untold. Use process to obscure the truth. There's a morbid irony in using control of the Justice Committee as the instrument to deny the function of the Justice Committee. If this were the Harper years, they'd call it muzzling. The Moors change with the tempors, I suppose. Love the wordplay. Haha, perfect. The first response to the charges of pressuring the Attorney General on behalf of SNC Lavalin was clear denial. Mr. Trudeau, quote, "The allegations in the Globe story are false." I remember when he said that, and I thought, I don't believe you, sir. Back to the article. They more or less dropped that one and moved on to a more slippery rationale. Yes, there was pressure. All those meetings, the PMO and Gerald Butts, the finance minister's aide, the clerk of the Privy Council, JWR's one-to-one with Mr. Trudeau. But it was good pressure because, SNC Lavalin employed so many people and they had to save 9,000 jobs. This was tactically something of an admission, a conditional one. It said, if we did put the heat on, if we did slightly overstep our bounds, well, as Mr. Trudeau emphasized at least 100 times, quote, "We will always fight to protect Canadian jobs. We're the Trudeau government. Jobs are what we are. We protect Canadian jobs. We may have acted badly, but our hearts were pure jobs." This newfound emphasis on jobs was a strange sunrise, puzzling to very many, with a verifiable revelation out in certain Western provinces. A social justice warrior government cast in the deepest shade of green, touting feminism, diversity, carbon taxes, equity for all, globalist in aspiration, was suddenly a jobs-first government? Now there was a costume change. You're in the theater. You've watched the first 3 acts of Hamlet. The curtains open on Act 4, and it's a Midsummer's Night's Dream. Enter Puck with his cover letter and resume. Building pipelines involves jobs. The oil sands involve jobs. Tens of thousands of jobs. Northern Gateway involved jobs. The Energy East pipeline involved jobs. Oil companies canceling projects involved jobs. The flight of headquarters from Calgary involved jobs. The still stalled Trans Mountain pipeline involves jobs. The most massive jobs hit in the Canadian economy involving an entire industry did not get 1/100th the prime attention that a single company with a dubious reputation already sanctioned outside of Canada and under investigation within received. Who can seriously believe the, quote, "we value jobs" line? Did they hound and set siege to the National Energy Board with the same ferocity and frequency the Attorney General was subject to for the benefit of SNC Lavalin? Was the Dark Lord of the Privy Council on the phone to the head of the NEB, reminding the board that there was a massive jobs involved in all these impeded and cancelled projects, seeking to slacken the regulations, speed up the process, get the approvals out pronto? Who can seriously believe the, quote, "we have jobs" line? Were they strong-arming the BC Premier to lower his opposition to the Trans Mountain? Were they backdooring the legal system to hold off on the nuisance lawsuits from environmentalists because so many valuable Canadian jobs were at stake? Were they fighting the Octopus Green Lobby's relentless campaign against Canadian energy, speaking out in international forums against its propaganda? The answer to all of these questions and 100 similar ones is no. A single company, SNC Lavalin, owned all the machinery and might of the PMO and the Prime Minister himself. In contrast, an entire national industry with employees across the full spread of the country was left to languish, or worse, be entangled in new regulations, staring down Bill C-69, burdened by new and useless so-called carbon taxes, and hearing the Prime Minister declare somewhat in exasperation, quote, "we can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow." I fear, in the light of how employment in the energy sector has been valued, that the "jobs are us" line is a bird that will not fly. Note to the Post readers, 2 or more people may experience this column differently, but diversity is our strength. And that was a fantastic column, and I thought it was very, very funny. So thank you, Mr. Murphy, for writing it. And I think it's really interesting. Mr. Trudeau, the more he tries to get away from this SNC stuff, the more stuff keeps trickling out. And I still think Miss Wilson-Raybould has a card to play. I think there's potentially another shoe to drop. And if you were holding an ace in the hole, 2 times to play it. One, after the budget, if you're just looking to bring down the government and or take the place of Justin Trudeau and leadership. And it's been pointed out to me that she may not have that as a goal. She may just say, this is the line. You can't give SNC this deferred prosecution agreement. And if you do that, I'll drop the other shoe. But until then, I won't do anything. And Lametti hasn't done anything with SNC other than say he's considering it. So he hasn't committed one way or the other. So that's my opinion. If Miss Wilson-Raybould does indeed have leadership aspirations and wants to take out Trudeau, she moves after the budget drops, and if Trudeau's planning on calling an early election, maybe she moves before the election's called, and if she does not have leadership aspirations and is just using it as leverage to keep something she thinks is illegal from happening, I could see that. But I don't know. We'll see. We will see. Tuesday is budget day. That's the 19th. And tomorrow, the Tories are going to be introducing a motion, so that's the Conservative Party, are going to be introducing a motion in the House to try and allow Miss Wilson-Raybould to speak. Spoiler alert, the Liberals are going to defeat that motion, and it's not going to happen. So, I mean, what are you going to do, right? That's our government. That's how things work. So, thank you for watching, everybody, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Check out the peoplespartyofcanada.ca.